Welcome to all the participants of this talk, which is on a topic which I'm 100% sure most of you are very, very desirous of, attending and knowing about BALLB specifically, because we get a lot of phone calls from parents, and most of our talks are around, the topics which become a kind of a question mark on the parents that. If my kid is going to take up law, how are they going to go ahead and face these subjects? So I understand with engineering, it's very clear. With medicine also, it's very clear that how to go about it, bio, sciences, etc. But with law, there is always this one confusion. And since BLLB is also one of those courses which is more sought after because the national law schools have been promoting it, I'm 100% sure there are many questions surrounding the subjects of BA. Now, I'm also very thrilled about this very topic which we are going to cover here for two reasons. The prime reason is that I was a commerce student who ventured into arts. I did my BA LLB, and I was also very curious about how this is going to take shape for me. But believe me, it was a great run. In fact, subjects of BA helped me become a better law student. The second reason that I'm more interested is and excited about it is because of my co-panelist here, who is Shireen. And, words are less if I talk about her, because I've been hearing a lot about her from my students here, who study here, and about the great kind of change that she's bringing into the thinking of the students, which is very important for them in the coming years of their law school life, because she's the one who takes care of this subject specifically, and she's the one who's shaping their thinking. And that goes great with her profile, which has been already been shared to you. So I will not waste my time reading the entire profile, because I'm 100% sure you might have all gone through her profile and known that the great amount of work that she has done and she is presently doing. Her entire career from where she started teaching. She's been associated with some of the great institutions of this country as well as abroad, and she's still working with some of the best names right now. But as I said, the topic concerns something which is towards the students who might have cracked CLAT, who are waiting, who might have calls from many national law schools and also law schools. Uh, they might have few questions about what is sociology, because it is basically, if you ask me, one of those basic subjects which kind of graphs your thinking about law, because it is about society, about how society works and how this law works in this entire society. And that is something which we chose as a topic to discuss today, because before you venture into that great question about BA or BBA, things should be clear from your own perspective. So we are not here to say that BA is better or BBA is better, because that's for you to take a call. So I'll lay down a few rules also before I start with the session. The rule is you can ask questions, but we do not expect questions about admissions in this talk very specifically, because this is purely an academic exercise which we do. So if you have some questions, go to the chat room and you can type your questions there. So my team is at the back end. If there are some questions, they will answer it. If your questions are related to the topic which we are covering here, I'll take up those questions and I'll ask Shireen at the end of it. Okay. So let's venture into the session. So Shireen, would you like to start with some of your pearls of wisdom, and then we go into the questions one by one?
My pearls of wisdom. What can I say? Except, please let me know if if I'm not audible, or sometimes I tend to speak too fast. So please stop me. And yeah, I mean, I would be happy to take questions and interact. I'm really looking forward to this session. And yeah, those are my pearls of wisdom.
Okay, so let's start with the first question, which is again very, very important. It goes at, what does the field of sociology look like in today's world? That's something which the kids have to understand, because sociology is a very dynamic subject. It keeps on changing. So something which happened, say, in the 1980s to the 1990s, today, say 2010, and after that also, things keep changing, right? So the question is very, very carefully drafted, and the intent of the question is basically to understand that what should a student expect when he comes to join a law school, say a course called as BLLB. It also asks you that how would you define the term social based on your current understanding, and how do you think it relates to law. So,
Hmm.
three questions together,
Yes.
but then it has a lot for you to answer. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start with the first question, which is, what does sociology mean in today's world? And then I'll come to the other two questions. And I think when we are looking at sociology, one of the points to understand is that this is a discipline that has emerged in the 1800s. It's I think one of the primary focus of this discipline is to understand one very key question, which is that how do we understand modern societies, modern industrial societies? And I'll explain what that is. What do I mean by modernity? What is that change that happened in human societies from the 1800s onwards, right? And which spread through colonialism to all other parts of the world, which is a term which we call as modernity. And it has certain features. So the thing about sociology, and that's a very important aspect to understand, is that it's trying to understand this transition, this change, this very slow maybe, but a very definitive change that took place in human society. Now, what is this change? Change was a change from feudal structures. So if you had, like, say, a lord, who owned certain property, who created laws, and there was a certain way of doing business in relation to this lord, all of that, or kings, all of that changed, right? And there was the emergence of what we call as private property. So that's the first feature of modernity, the emergence of private property. The second one is that of mass production. So if you had earlier, you have people who worked in crafts, you had potters, weavers, guilds. All of that changed, and there was something called the mass production of goods, right? That kind of connects societies in a very big way. The third idea is that of the coming in of science and technology. The coming in of the steam engine, maritime routes, the world got much more connected, and with science came this idea that you question tradition, you question religion. So you question the idea that why should I follow something that has been told to me because a holy text says so, or the church says so, or the priest says so, right? So that idea of modernity, you can think of it as a bit of a teenage rebellious moment, right? Where humanity actually just slowly woke up to the idea of the power of the individual, the power of the human to reason, to think for themselves, to create, whether it's an art, architecture, poetry, right? And this came all as kind of questioning the idea of destiny, the idea that my destiny is already written, that I that is decided through fate. It is decided through how the divine plan that God has for me. Modernity questioned all that. It gave power to the individuals. It gave power to reasoning, to thinking, to creating, right? And with that comes a very important aspect, which is that of the emergence of law, the emergence of codification. So you actually have law which moves from custom, so which is sort of tradition which you follow from what your father says. You do it because it's been done before. You don't ask, you don't substantively look at the reason and the logic and the consequence of something. You actually just do it because it's done before, right? So law again comes in at this particular context. So the rise of cities again is a part of modernity, where people migrate, and then you have this mass production, and there's a change of the nature of market. You also have a lot of changes in family structure. So now with private property, you have the coming in of from joined to a nuclear family. You have the idea that you pick your own partner and you do it on the basis of love, of romantic love, right? It's the idea of independence as well. So no more is it something that is that society tells you. It's if you're in the same caste and you marry somebody from within your caste, or you don't necessarily follow those traditional rules, right? So the idea of family changes, the idea of romantic love changes, the idea of our dependence. So if earlier we dependent on we relied, say, on our village to meet our needs. With industrial society, with modern societies, that need becomes far more complex. So for one product, you have so many kinds of, it's manufactured in different parts in different places, and it's traded and it's exported. So you see it's a kind of complex ways in which society, different, its functions become far more complex and differentiated. So that's modernity. And the task of sociology is to really understand that how has society changed, right? So we have got richer, we have got, we've got our modes of market and functioning, and our modes of property, and what we consider sacred and what we consider important, all of that has changed in a very, very quick and a very dramatic way. So sociology tries to understand this in multiple ways. So different writers try to understand this in different ways, and they try to ask, are people happier? Are people more content? Are people more independent? Are they more able to exercise their free will than they did before? And they do it through the idea of state, different aspects of society, right? So state is one aspect, religion is one aspect, economy is one aspect, law is one aspect, family is one aspect. So through these aspects, sociology tries to understand all the kinds of transformation that has happened, right? So that's the kind of very central problem to understand when we're talking about sociology. Now, this links to today's world. So I think, Deepu, you asked me the question, how is it relevant in today's world? So in today's world, we are seeing this, the problem of modernity actually only become more intensified, more, far more complicated, right? So we are now in the midst of an environmental crisis, which is known also as the climate change crisis, which is, what is climate change, right? It is a certain changes in weather and temperature patterns, and if industrial societies led to the use of fossil fuel, we are now seeing how carbon dioxide emissions are forming a sort of a layer, like a blanket on the surface of the earth, and how that is causing, the planet to get hotter, and that's what we're calling climate change, a certain kind of changes in weather, which is leading to the melting of glaciers, the rising of sea levels, the depletion of soils, loss of biodiversity, loss of animals, and all of this is happening simultaneously in a way which is not just adding but compounding, right? So we are still going back to the questions of modernity and industrialization and all of those things that sociology started off with, except now in today's age, these are far more pressing, far more important, far more complex, right? So there's one problem that I would identify as an environmental crisis. There's another problem of, say, a mental health crisis, right? So we are seeing the kind of breakdown of family structures. We're seeing high divorce rates. We're seeing how romantic love actually is leading to, I don't know, a lot of, say, maybe heartaches. We're seeing a whole lot of loneliness. We're seeing a whole lot of, social media, anxiety. So mental health, again, is another kind of crisis, the crisis of individual, the crisis of loss of meaning. So why am I existing? Why am I living, right? So all of those things that really began with when we questioned, when we question custom and tradition and God and family and all those changes that actually now have led us to this point. We also are in the midst of an acute food crisis, right? So when we have moved to chemical farming and we are using agriculture to increasing productivity, then the kind of questions we're asking is, what is health? What are health concerns, and how will that be met? And so on. And then there's another area which is relevant today, which is something which again began with the industrial age and with modernity, which is the rise of technology. And now that becomes a very acute question, right? So we are in the moment of AI, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And with all of that, we're actually looking at a very, where we kind of don't know what the future really holds for us, because in a sense, we're looking at AI maybe replacing human functioning, employment, right? And then we're actually asking ourselves, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean what is the task of technology? Does it make it easier? Is it replacing us? What is the nature of employment and jobs that is going to be in the future? And all of this. So sociology then becomes so absolutely crucial, because its birth is actually at that moment when we are talking about modernity and transformation. Except now, All of this is, it's at an extreme level. So those questions become far more pressing. But then to come to your second question, right, which is how does it relate to law? And like I said before, law is also a result of modernity. It was actually born in this post-industrial, and if you look at sociology, understands the birth of law. It sees it as some kind of a development. So as society changed from simple and became complex, you had a change in the way that law and rules were understood. So, say in ancient civilization, so if you look at Egypt, Mesopotamia, Babylon, Rome and India, you had custom was law. So what was followed through your ancestors was what was law, right? And then maybe it was decided by a tribal chieftain, maybe it was decided by a king, maybe it was decided through some kind of a sacred order. Those are ways in which law functioned. It was never codified. But in when society modernized, this custom actually became something which was codified and converted into law, which is supposed to be something which is not determined by any one particular individual. It's something which is uniformly applied across cultures, peoples, civilizations. It's formal, it's impersonal, so there's no reliance on any private interest, private party, private persons. In principle, it's supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be exercised through certain ideas of reason, right? So that's modern law. So to understand law, we need sociology, because law is born really at the idea of rationality, really goes back to the idea of modernity, which is actually the problem that sociology is trying to think of. Um, so, how are law and so if we bring both these aspects together, law and sociology and law and society, there are two things that we're thinking about. The first is that what law is doing is that it is protecting society and social rules and social norms. What is a norm? It's a social value. So family is a value, tradition is a value, private property is a value. The idea of crime, right? When somebody breaches either murders or rapes or whatever, there's a crime that happens, so there's a breach of certain values. So what does law do? It protects against chaos, it protects against disorder, it protects ideas of property, it punishes those who perform a certain crime, it protects the idea of business and families and so on. So that's one way in which law and society directly comes together, where law is protecting social values. There's a second one, right, where law is transforming society, right? And that this becomes very important to understand. There is something like a social morality, where society says this is right. So maybe according to society, homosexuality is wrong, but law will take a very different view. It will ask what how should society change, or what does society ought to become, what is society ought to be. And it is guided by certain other kinds of morality, which sometimes we call constitutional morality, which is ideas of equality, ideas of justice, idea of dignity. These may be in sync with social values, but they may not be in sync with social values. And then here law, actually does the job of being a torchbearer or a guide, and it shows the direction and sort of, shows ways in which society should change and can change, right? So law and society have they are really, I mean, you can't talk about one without talking about the other.
Just listening to you, and I remembered a discussion where I was discussing with some of our students,
Mm,
and I was just thinking about their thought pattern also, because you talked about
mm,
environment, you talked about sustainability. So there are a
mm.
few students who said that they buy only few clothes because they care about the environment. You
Okay.
know, they're like they have those only clothes because they are very clear that these are the
Yeah.
clothes they require for the week or for the month, and we do not go and do spur buying. We do not have Mintra. We do not have anything on our mobile because we
Yeah.
care about the environment. We care about the sustainability.
Okay.
And that's when I thought, yeah, these are the kind of students, who
Yeah.
get into law, who are there in the class, who are probably
Yeah.
imbibing all these things.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes.
that's the way forward actually, and that's what these students would do when they become, say, lawyers. They would become the flag bearers, like you said.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So again, coming not back to the question, but I'm very curious to know specifically from the perspective of a student,
Okay.
the students who might be attending this session of ours, that why sociology is so important when you study law. So what is that importance that, because their understanding, I'll tell you, is that sociology is all about theories,
Yeah.
about, say, a single thing. Let's take marriage, let's take family.
Mm.
Uh, different ideologues have been said, different theories have been propounded, and they have written those theories. So why should we read all those things? And how does it help us further in studying of law? That's one of
Okay.
those questions. And it's very simple. Legal principles, like you said, is about constitution. It's
Yeah.
about family law. It's about criminal law.
Yes.
Generally about corporate law. Because many
Yes.
students also think that doing a BLLB, I won't become a corporate lawyer, which is
Yeah.
absolutely wrong. Because after doing BLLB, you can become anything. That's what I have
Yes.
learned from my own life.
Yeah.
But then how does it help? How does sociology, studying those concepts, those theories, are going to help them in their further journey?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. So, Deepu, to just come back to the instance that you used, right? So students who don't want to maybe, buy on Mintra and buy lots and be these consumers and be responsible because they care for the climate. Now, if you look at it from the perspective of sociology, and it ties up with your question as well, sociology will tell you, it will tell you really that individual acts don't matter. So, I mean, as much as you care, it's so nice that you care. I wish, more people cared, but actually it doesn't matter. That's what sociology will tell you. Because one of the things what is sociology? It's a study of society. And when you study society, you're studying larger patterns and structures and power. So what you're saying is that, and so this is what sociology does, right? It gives you a certain way of how to think. It's simply just that it tunes your mind on how you can think and how you think of larger problems. So problems of crime, problems of family, problems of all of environment, all of that. But it puts you in terms of how you can think about it. Because the thing that sociology teaches us, and and this is what we call the sociological imagination, it is just simply this, which is that all of us as individuals, we may think that we're very unique, we may think that we matter, but according to sociology, all our thoughts, all our actions, all our behavior actually comes from this larger society that is we are embedded in, that we're socialized into. Because as soon as you're born, you have a language, you have a religion, you have a family, you have a skin color. All of those things already, they start really from maybe sometimes, in previous lifetimes, right? And so society tells us this, that sociology tells us this, that there is something called the sociological imagination. And if we think on that imagination, we realize that, individuals really hardly matter. And we are embedded in these social structures. And we don't even realize it because it is as like the air we breathe. So we don't realize, ways in which a girl is made as a girl and a boy is made as a boy, whether it's told not to cry, or whether it's told to be strong, or whether he's told to be the breadwinner, whether she's told that she's caring and she must keep the family together, all of these things, right? In just the way that language is taught to us, the way we think of the state and money, right? The idea of money and value and transaction. Where do all of these things that we don't even question, where does it come from? So sociology tells us that this is part of a larger structure, and as individuals, we are embedded in our structure. And there's somebody called Emile Durkheim, right? My students have just finished an exam, and he's giving them a bit some nightmares. But so Emile Durkheim talks about social norms, and he says that our human ways of individual ways of thinking, acting, feeling. While you feel it's so, I'm so unique, it's so, and what I feel is so important and all of that. He says, well, actually what, you're not unique. This is all part, every thought of yours is actually coming from somewhere. You're feeling anxious because there's something called the social media that is telling you that this is how your body should look like. There's something called the market that's telling you that it's a race going on and you need to compete and you need to be ahead, and there's competition, but there's something like the state that's that's regulating, and there's and it's exercising a certain kind of power. There's religion, and all of this comes down, trickles down to our family, trickles down to you, and so that's what sort of sociological imagination does. But then again, sociology is not this one way of thinking. It's so multiple and so diverse. So then there comes somebody else called Max Weber, and again, he's given our students some bit of nightmares. And he actually questions this, and he says that, well, society is structure. So economy is, you and I didn't create it. It's a structure. The state is a structure. Religion is a structure. Family is a structure. None. It existed before us. It's going to exist after us. So all of these are there. Yes, but individuals matter. And how do individuals matter? It matters because we are able to be motivated. We are able to think and prioritize in terms of our values. This is important to me. That's not so much important to me. We are able to reason. We're able to, and he says, when you do that, you actually are able to transform society and these social structures. You're able to transform family, you're able to transform. So you're able to actually normalize something like homosexuality, because we are able to be very specific in our goals, in our intentions, in our motivations, and all of that changes. Once we decide that we want to change things, it's possible to do it, right? That's what Weber says. And we do it through reason, we do it through values, and so on. So yeah, what was your question actually? Why is sociology important to start understanding law? So society and sociology is actually, law comes from society, right? So law is nothing but a social structure from within society. It is actually nothing but a construction of rules and authority, in which the state is there to apply these rules, right, and uphold law. All of this are social constructs. So law is society, right? So you to study law, you need to study society. And in the case of India, if we just go by a very simple definition of, say, custom, right? And if we just still look, if we look at, how the role that custom plays in India, a lot of our customary frameworks, they exist in that way, right? So you have the idea of the Nyaya Panchayat, where panchayat members sit, and these are non-statutory bodies, and they resolve small time disputes, they resolve minor criminal and civil disputes. Then you also have like lok adalats, where in the case of the metropolitan Delhi, you have certain, informal ways in which things happen. So you have tribal councils. So this customary basis, caste councils, all of that still continues in the context of India. So one very direct, if you want a very direct connection between law and society, one is this, right? You have non-customary bodies that still exist, and in order to understand that, there's a very direct connection in that one, in that sense. In another sense, to understand the second point, in which there's a very direct connection, even if you don't want to go back through the sociological imagination and structures that I just spoke about, just a very directly, the law and society connection is very stark in the case of these non-statutory bodies. One. Second, it's also in the case of ways in which law is changing society, right? So the idea of gender, if you look at the Shabrimala case, right? If same-sex marriage, if we look at heteronormative ideas of family, the idea of caste and reservation, right? So all of this, all these social ideas are there in our constitution. It's there in our directive principles, and and law is trying to change and transform society. It's if you remember those 2 points I said, law upholds but also transforms. There's that very direct link, and you need to understand society to see what is the constitution doing in terms of talking about what are directive principles doing when it talks about gender equality, when it's talking about reservation. So if you don't understand sociology, you won't understand what is the law doing with reservation. So you won't know how to read the Maratha reservation case. You won't know how to read, the question of adultery or triple talaq, any of these. So this is all part of sociology. So it's a very intrinsic part of sociology. And the third point I would say, right, and this is kind of links to our theme of the session, which is of cutting edge lawyering, which is that, so say tomorrow, if you don't want to do litigation and you want to go into some kind of, company, you want to work in a firm, for instance, and you're meeting clients. Sociology and also helps you really see the larger picture. It also helps you connect to clients, right? So your client could be working on a certain kind of property matter. So sociology helps you really see everything in that very large context. It helps you really connect to people as people. You really understand where somebody is coming from, where what their values are, what their system is. So without sociology, you're really so one-dimensional, and I think that's what cutting edge learning is all about, right? Where it's not just about black letter application, this is the law and you apply it. It's something else that you need to be really that top-notch lawyer. And for that, you need sociology. For that, you need, I would say, history, political science. You need that whole picture, right? You need that emotional intelligence. You need that way of that larger connect between how do different elements relate to one another. How will that emerge? That only emerges when you study things like the humanities, something like sociology.
The discussion just made me remind an incident when the Section 377 judgment
Yeah.
came, and I remember I was taking a session, and I went ahead and I explained it to the students that Section 377, it was draconian, but there was no need to go ahead and try to get it abolished. They should have said that, expand the meaning, that consensual sex, which it turned out to be eventually. And then I remember that even I told them that the wrong law which is in our country in context of the LGBT community is the marriage laws, because whatever marriage laws if you pick up, it talks about male and female. Even the Special Marriage Act also talks about the same. So if you really want to challenge it and really go against it, which may address this issue also later, first you should have fought against the marriage laws and said, So I remember a lot of furor inside the class. Kids were saying, "What are you saying, sir? It should be between male and female." But this is long back, and now you see after the Section 377 battle, the next is this. So that's how the pattern of thinking also develops in a society.
Absolutely.
And I think it was in law school where whatever I said, the kind of rationality which was in that argument or in that observation which I had, came from the class of sociology, because I remember our sociology professor also telling about the duties of the sexes, as in how it has been distributed, how or why it had been distributed, why women stayed back, why men went for hunting. But it does not prove that there were not women who did not go for hunting. So there might be who saw these things. And then they said, if you go and read the scriptures also, there might be a woman also there in the image. So it's not like that. It's just like our perception, how we have imposed. And that's something which used to click in our mind. And I have seen that a lot has been said against liberal education and humanities also, that people become woke, people become that, blah blah blah. But then it also creates a kind of a rationality which is much needed for studying law, because law talks in context of, like you said, it is not something which will tell you yes, no, or it will say white, black. It will tell you why a yes, why a no.
Correct.
Will give you that reason, and that reason comes from studying of the entire pattern, where history also plays, sociology also plays.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on further, the next question would be that Why is understanding of society or seeing the bigger picture important uh, to the context as well as the philosophical aspects of law? Because philosophy is something that I'll tell you, when I was also a student of who had just graduated from 12th class, I was also like, Arey, philosophy, why should I read it? I should rather run away. That's
Yeah.
something which was in my mind also.
Yeah.
But then later on, when I started reading it, I started comparing it. I understood the the base of it, that why philosophy.
Yeah.
And I remember even Steve Jobs, the great Steve Jobs, also used to push people to read more and more of philosophy, because
Yeah.
he was like, if you read more philosophy, you become a better human being. And that was something which he followed throughout his life also, and that's how he promoted humanity.
Yeah.
So in context of law, what would be your answer?
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right, Deepu. I think one of the takeaways from what you just said is that sociology and the humanities, they give you what we're calling as critical thinking. Now, it sounds like a, important term and what you're saying, how to think. But what is critical thinking? It's this, it's questioning, right? Like you are
Yeah,
told a certain truth. Like, I'm sure we all do this. You ask, why should I do this? Why are the gender roles the way they are? And this becomes very important in the context of law, to ask really, can I trust what is in front of me? So is this actually verified knowledge? Where does it come from? Why did the Supreme Court, for instance, interpret a judgment in this way? How did that happen? What are the different stakeholders? To understand that whole, the role of the state, the role of politics, the role of black letter law, the role of of precedent, principles, concepts, all of this, right? And to actually see it not just as something that you need to reproduce and learn and kind of imbibe and just say it verbatim. There's also what humanities and sociology does is that it allows it sharpens your thinking ability. It brings you this ability to ask why, where, and not take it on face value, right? To ask, where is this coming from and why is it the way it is and what is behind it. That behind story then becomes absolutely important, right? And if you look at the way in which corporates now work, companies now work, it's no more about just money and making profits. That time is gone. Actually, now every company wants to be seen as environmentally responsible. They want to be seen as people who are giving equal opportunities to genders. They want to be seen as having certain kind of racial, ethnic diversity. They want to be seen as people who do not tolerate sexual harassment, all of that, the stuff that we know, right? So the way of doing business has changed. And as we were talking about when we first did that question on climate change and environment, what that really shows us is that we don't really know what the future is like, right? So whether how markets will perform, we really do. There's no, that idea of certainty. We'll see with the coming in of AI, that certainty doesn't exist. So what are companies looking for are people who are able to, one is add value not just in terms of getting the job done. So you're given a brief and you get the job done. Not just that, but to able to see things in that larger context, to see the meaning behind something, to ask the whys. Why is this like this? Where does it come from? How does market relate to, say, the Russia-Ukraine war? How does that relate to larger geopolitics? To make those kind of connections, what's happening in India today, right? So to make those connections then become absolutely essential, to be able to not just go along with things, but to be able to evaluate. Is AI good for you? What are the certain kinds of concerns? How should the state and law regulate new technologies? All these become very important concerns, right? And for that, the why is very important. And the why only comes through philosophy. It only comes through, and it's hard. Sociology is hard. Philosophy is very hard, but it's so worth that hard work, because that's when that's when you start opening your mind up to why. And particularly our education system is such, we're not encouraged to ask why. We're just encouraged to just receive and reproduce, right? And that time is over. that way of doing business is over. That way of education is over, right? So then, whether you're doing BBA, whether you want to work in corporate, whether you want to litigate, whatever you want to do in terms of law, you need this kind of thinking, you need this kind of basis, you need to be able to see, to differentiate between what is the truth, what is false knowledge, what is verifiable knowledge, you need to be able to evaluate the role of technology, to see connections between different political movements, and to see it in a larger historic thread. All of that really comes in through humanities. And I tell you, Deepu, we had an interesting instance. There was a certain professor from Ireland who had come to Butzlaw, and he was telling us something very interesting. So he was a director, and he was of the law school in one of the Irish universities, and he was saying that they have their BBA cohort and they have an MBA and so on, but the people that companies really look to recruit are their law and justice students, right? And he just felt like law and justice is, again, it'll require your human rights people, or
Hmm.
those, and you would see that not having a certain kind of market value. But he says we found it very interesting that those who graduated from this law and justice program were being, companies were asking for them. They were the first people to be recruited. And then we went and asked ourselves, why is that happening? Why are companies looking to recruit from a law and justice program and not, say, those who are specializing in corporate law, company law, whatever? And the answer was that simply because they had this, they were people who would just ask why this and why that, and what is behind it, and how do I make sense of it? So because, and that's what people want. That is the kind of added value that companies see, because like I said, it's no more about just doing this kind of plain business, right?
Yeah,
It's much more.
absolutely. Yeah, specifically European countries, I've seen them. They
Yeah,
do stress a lot on these things, and
yeah,
that's why uh, I've seen our students also, getting great scholarships in
yeah,
Europe, where they want our students to come and ask those whys,
yeah,
and be it a PhD research scholar or anyone,
yeah.
they are more interested in the questions which we create.
Yes.
We have a very good question from Saikat Das Sharma. He's one of
Okay.
our attendees. He is asking us, the law school seeks to mold learners, students into becoming socially conscious and well-rounded legal professionals. How does this curriculum at our law school incorporate principles, series of sociology to achieve those goals?
Okay.
So, what do we do? That's his question.
What do we do? Okay. So, at Bitslaw, one of the things that we are doing is that we are very clear that we want to have a very give students a very strong grounding in social sciences and humanities, and our students do these. And we also don't want it to be, each independent discipline. So we've tried in the first semester to have a very interdisciplinary approach. So we've curated a course in which every concept that you will need within law. So these, like, for example, idea of society, the idea of state, the idea of what is reason, right? We just do inductive, deductive, but we actually went into, what is reason, how it is tied up with goals and evaluation and consequences. So we actually did an entire course that looked at these concepts in through multiple vantage points, simply so that all those silos and that narrow way of thinking is completely opened out, and you're able to make connections. The other thing that we did, we're trying to do in Bits Law, we're trying to, I don't know, make learning more rounded. So, and as Deepu, as you said, philosophy and sociology are, they're difficult disciplines, and students, they find it difficult to grapple with abstract concepts. So, with sociology, we followed a three-prone learning approach. So the first thing we did is that we used a lot of audio, video devices, and we really went into the larger context of, like, what I just started off with. What is modern societies? What is enlightenment? And what is reason? And so we started up from a broad context. Then we had a second prone step where we looked at a kinesthetic or a very applied approach. So we had, fun, exciting tutorials in which we did certain exercises. So, for instance, we had this one exercise in which with a blindfold activity. So you have two people, one is blindfolded and the other person is guiding this person, right? And then they switch the role. Why did we do that? We did that so that you understand. One is it's an exercise in empathy. So you understand what it is to be blindfolded and to guide the other, right? Then you understand what it is to interpret people and what it is to interpret societies and what it is to interpret rules, right? So with that, we learned Weber, right? Because Weber talks about interpretation and Weber talks about subjectivity. So we did this very interesting way in which we did sociology. We didn't just keep it at the level of concept. We actually experienced that concept in through very interesting ways. And then we actually did a third, more boring level in which we actually went through that text and we said, okay, this is the concept, this is the definition, and so on, right? So there were three levels at which we studied, we did sociology at its law. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, there is one more interesting question, which I am sure you're going to find it very interesting because it relates to psychology also.
Okay.
So there is Anushka Gandhi who's asking us to understand clients. Is psychology also not equally important as sociology?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, psychology is important, but I would say sociology is just like what is psychology? Psychology is when you understand the individual mind, right? And for a client, I mean, I don't know if you really need to go into the mind of a client, right? What sociology gives you is your an ability to locate that client. So you locate that client in a particular cultural milieu, in a particular geographical context. You locate the client. You bring in a certain other kind of intelligence. So for example, you have a teacher who's just teaching you through a very textbook approach, right? And you may not have a very strong connect with that teacher. But if that teacher is looking at you as an individual, is able to understand where you are coming from, is able to understand and connect with you emotionally, which is not necessarily, you're feeling sad or you're feeling happy. That becomes a bit hard to do. But she's able to connect, with the larger problems that you are facing because these are, at a very large social or the problems that really come from larger structures, is able to bring that understanding and is able to bring that not just with you, the person, the client, but also your case. Now, you are going to go back to that teacher, you're going to go back to that lawyer many times, right? And the interesting thing about law is that law is, even if you're guilty, you have a chance to present your case, right? You have a chance to appeal your case. So law gives you those multiple vantage points, and it really becomes so important to see things from that multiple perspective, right? To see, one, how a person is guilty, but also to see the other side, right? What if they're not? So you're constantly weighing things down, weighing things, advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons. And so sociology is important because it allows you that ability to weigh, the ability to connect, the ability to see something in a maybe in a kinder way. And as Deepu said, it shapes your thoughts and minds and your response as a human being, right? So can you respond more empathetically? Can you respond more humanely? Can you respond at a human level, right? So I would say, sociology is far more important. In a way, psychology will reveal something which is very narrow, but sociology will give you that location in a person's family, in a person's culture, in a person's way of reasoning, will give you reasons why somebody may or may not have conducted a certain crime, and it will allow you to look at the unsaid, to look at what is behind in a way that's far more engaging, far more empathetic, right? And I think that is so important to being a good lawyer.
I remember, as in answering to you, Anushka, if you're looking for psychology also, the law course also has a subject called as criminology, which is a part of psychology, where you will be taught far more intense level of psychology. And a student who understands sociology, who has already read the concepts about how a society is formed, the myriad of rules and principles, customs, etc., which we humans have created, it becomes easier to understand human beings then. Because once you have done sociology, psychology, I think, becomes more easier to you. You can understand that why a person even becomes a criminal. I remember, in my criminology classes, there was a topic called as victimology, where we were asked to even look at a criminal as a victim, because he has become a victim
Yeah.
of society. Society has been so bad to him
Absolutely.
that he became a criminal. And that's
Yeah.
how we started understanding things. Even we went to a jail, we were asked to interview.
Yeah.
And then, my God, we remember our all
Yeah.
concepts which we had learned till our 12th standard, all
Yeah.
went for toss. And we were like, what is
Yeah.
happening, man? So
No, but
that's
also, Anushka, I think what's also important is to understand that all of these are allied disciplines, right? So, sociology, psychology, history, political science, these are, we have created them as separate boundaries and separate questions. But in a lot of ways, it's very important to understand the interconnections, because I think when we're talking about cutting edge lawyering, cutting edge new pedagogies and knowledges, I think we've reached a point in terms of human societies where information is easy to come by. You can Google anything, right? You have encyclopedias, it's all a click away, so you really don't need someone to give you the information. What you need is knowledge. You need the ability to make sense across things and see how different things connect. So it goes back to the whys and goes back to the hows and where have things come from. And for that, it becomes important to see something from multiple vantage points. So psychology will give you this one narrow beam of looking at something, right? It's a small torchlight onto one object. Sociology will give you one, and history will give you one, and but I think it's important to see those interconnections and to see it in a sort of, that's when the holistic picture comes in, and that's where knowledge gets activated, not information.
right.
Information is something, like I said, it's there. We have your what are they called, what are those things called, where you ask a device, can you Google this for me? It's on your phones all the time. What is the in your phone, you tell, can you search this for me?
Alexa?
Alexa. Yeah, so I mean, Alexa will do it for you, right? So you don't need information. Alexa will do it for you so much faster than any of us can, right? But what Alexa hopefully can't do is knowledge, evaluate, see how things connect, right? So I would see psychology in relation and sociology in relation with all the other disciplines
this
as
last
sisters,
this
huh?
last few minutes of what you said about
Hmm.
knowledge, I would want to record it and play it at multiple places. That's what is the truth, actually.
Yeah,
Knowledge,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that too from different angles. That is
yeah,
what is the most important thing.
yeah.
Absolutely correct, Shiri. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's where the cutting edge point comes in, isn't it, Deepu? Because a cutting edge lawyer is somebody who's able to bring that wisdom, is able to bring
100,
that knowledge, right?
100,
Because black letter law or referring to a particular law, looking at a certain precedence, that's so easy. Alexa will do it for you. Why do you need any lawyer, right? But where you will come in is when you are able to see false knowledge from fake news, to something what chat gpt generates, to how you evaluate it, how you understand it, what is the truth, and the truth in a particular context. That whole picture, that bigger picture we're talking about, where does that come from? That will come from wisdom and knowledge and experience and all, and philosophy and humanities and all of the stuff we've been talking about.
100%.
Mhm.
So, moving on to the next question, are there any specific legal cases of current events that you believe
Hmm.
exemplify the close relationship between law and society? And how do these examples demonstrate the significance of adopting a contextual approach?
Hmm.
Can you give an instance in which the context influenced legal decisions?
Of course.
I'm 100%
Yeah.
sure you have a lot of them, because the past 5 to 6 years have been
Yeah,
remarkably.
like I mean, any case you pick up, no
Yeah.
case is possible without a social context,
Yes, yes,
and
absolutely.
particularly, yeah. And now I think we are a very how do you say it? litigious society. So the litigation and litigating is a very important mode of functioning. So when businesses collapse, there's litigation happening. When relationships collapse, there's litigation that's happening, right? So every case, any case you pick up, right, there's a certain social context in which that particular case emerges. But I don't know, to my mind, the important case would be the Shabrimala case, for instance, which is the rights of women versus tradition, right? So how that, how the court evaluates, and the court takes a very specific position to change social norms. We were talking about this when we began, right? Law reinforces sometimes, and it protects social ideas, but also transforms. So here's a instance of transformation. The Jallikattu case, right, where the Supreme Court upheld the practice of Jallikattu. Here you have a very different kind of role that the court plays. Triple talaq. Now that again, you have again a very complex case where you have the rights of Muslim women versus traditional rights, right? And the court again takes a particular view on it, and then passes a bill. And there's a certain historic moment in which it emerges. There's a role of the state. There's a very strong politics behind how this happens, and it gets again a very contested thing. There's so many cases. There are the farm laws, right? So the farm laws were one in which the state wanted to change the way in which agriculture and farming happens, and then you have a whole lot of protest of farmers, and then the court actually intervenes, and these laws get repealed. So there's that instance, right? Then again you have the stuff we've been talking about, the 377. The 377 judgment happens really because there's a whole social momentum. You have prides taking place, you have people gathering, there's a way in which they are trying to influence society, and a very ground up movement then leads to them going to court and asking the court to repeal 377, which happens. But then the same sex marriage, then the court actually is divided on it, and they feel that it becomes too difficult a task for the court to undertake. Then you have cases of marital rape, you have cases of adultery, right? All of these are courts trying to evaluate what should the role of the woman be, which laws are giving her more agency, what should be repealed, or how should things change. So many, I mean, the instances would be yeah uh, multiple. And I think what gets interesting, one is we can all take sides and say whether the court was right and wrong and what happened. But I think it gets far more important if we can see two principles contradicting and which are at stake here. So, women's rights versus traditional rights, or corporate interests versus a farmer's interest, right? All of these. So, I think when you see it in that larger context, then we're able to form more evaluated and more complex opinions about these cases. But I think any case now that you bring up will be something that has a very strong social context in which the law is either trying to reinforce a certain social norm or is transforming it, right?
Perfect. So there is this one question by a student, uh, Chinmay Mishra. He's asking, what is law according to sociology?
What is law according to sociology?
Yeah, it's an interesting
Um,
question.
Interesting question. What is a very complex? What is law? Right? So many people have debated and thought about it. Is law the text in which is there in the law? Is it the context in which law emerges? Is law what was there yesterday? Is it the changes that have happened today? Right. So what is law? Is it the judges? Are they also social actors? Right. So I would say, from the perspective of sociology, um, law is its context in which law is made, and which law unfolds. Law is also the social context in which changes happen, right? And so, law is the people, the the farmers, the Adivasis, the NGOs, you and me, right? You and me, say we get into relationships and we make these promises, which is called a marriage. But it is law that actually comes and sanctifies it and says that, well, this marriage is solemnized in some way, and and the law oversees it, right? So law is you and me, law is people, right? Law is marginal groups. Law is lawmakers, law is lawyers, and law is the context in which law emerges. But definitely, what sociology does is it takes law just away from the textbook and gives it a larger life beyond the book.
Okay, so we have some paucity of time. So I'll
Yeah.
just quickly go through few questions which are very important. One of which relates to your personal experience or observation of teaching sociology to students at Brit Law School, and also how has been that experience and what are the pedagogical challenges that you have faced?
Experience of teaching. It's been very interesting. There are students, particularly in our BBA, who first really found it so difficult. But by the end of the course, they could swear that so much within them has changed, and they were converted, and they found it so absolutely meaningful. Then, of course, there are some who continue to struggle, right? The challenges that I think personally we have faced, and this is the case with I think most educators across the board, especially post-COVID, we find that students do not want to do the hard work of reading, writing, drafting, and law is about your tools are reading, writing, drafting, making notes, researching, right? And for some reason, we find these skills are on a real decline across the board, right? So people really come into law thinking it's very glamorous, but actually it's a lot of desk work. It's a lot of going through big files. It's going through the small nitty-gritties of things, and that's been a bit of a challenge actually. How to get students to read, to get them interested. And no one in India teaches you either how to think or how to write well. And so that's been a challenge for us. And but we are working towards it. And so much has changed in our students in a few months. From what we got to where they are, it's been quite tremendous and challenging for them and us as well.
That's one of the reasons why we have incorporated a small change in the interview process also this year, so that the faculties also get to know the reading, capacity and comprehension capacity of the students. Because
there's no shortcut to it. Yeah, there's nothing that Alexa can do. There's no chat GPT. It's you, it's your motivation, it's your ability to work hard, it's your ability to put yourself. It's not easy to read, it's not easy to research, but it's that staying capacity, right? And also that becomes so key.
Yeah. So there is a question from a student, not to you, but I think she's aiming at us and asking whether the recording of the session is happening. Yes, it is happening, and don't worry. Post the session, we have a habit of sending you a thank you note with the recording of the video, so you can see it. Also, don't worry. I know this session has been assessed that you'll want to revisit for some of those lines and also share it with your parents, because that's the reason why we have these sessions, because there are some questions, like I said at the beginning of the session itself, which are going to hound you before you take the decision of joining a course or joining a law school. So this should help you a lot, to bring that clarity is the sole purpose of the session. So don't worry, we'll be sharing the recording. Plus also something which I'm going to ask Shireen as my last question of the evening. And the list which I want from her is also something which I'm going to share with you all. So Shireen, the question is, can you recommend any further resources or readings for students who are interested in delving deep into the intersection of law and society? And I would request you that after the session, please do send us this list also.
I'll do that. I'll send you a list. I have a few books here with me. So
please do show.
Durkheim, I refer to Durkheim, Rules of Sociological Method. Yeah, very important. Actually, quite readable, easy to read, but we'll guide you. Once you take up law, we are all here to help you. Again, more on Durkheim, right? He talks about, if you're looking at law in an Indian context, you have this book, very easily readable, by T.K. Umeen and C.N. Venugopal, called the Social Sciences for Law Students. You will find, it's divided into it makes sociology easy, right? It talks about social change, social process, social order. Um, um, it also talks about the kind of experimentation that's happened in our national law schools and that journey. So this is a very good book as well for just law and society. Um, if you're looking at Indian sociology, if you want to understand, and there is, one on social stratification by the Pankar Gupta. This is sort of, a very classic, in which talks about caste, class. It's multiple kinds of essays on tribes. So this is sort of your classic stuff, right? So if this is something that interesting read and you could read, but I'll send you a list.
Yeah,
If you
that
want
list
something
will be.
more on technology that I was talking about and climate change that I was talking about, I'll have to, and I'll send Deepu, I'll send you a list and you can forward it to everybody.
Yeah. And that list is something which we will share with the student. And if there are some articles also, which
Okay.
saying that are going to be, so you can send us the link also. We'll share
Yeah.
that link also with the
Yeah.
students so that they can read
Yeah.
and they can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me in the beginning of the session my pearls of wisdom and my advice. So, if I can give you one advice, because we've been doing these interviews with potential students, with young students who've just given CLAT, or this is before they were going to give CLAT, I would say, please read your newspapers. That's something, for some reason, that's not been taken very seriously. So for a lot of students, that becomes absolutely essential. So wake up in the morning and spend some time reading not just the news itself, but the editorial page. See if you can read The Guardian, for instance. Guardian has some very interesting articles, particularly on science, technology, artificial intelligence. All of that becomes very important. So make it a habit to read one Indian newspaper and one international newspaper of your choice, right? In a way that these are newspapers that don't just give you the hardcore news that you can get from television. So maybe don't watch TV at all. Don't watch the kind of news that goes on that actually tells you how somebody wants you to think. Here are the ideas for you to be independent thinkers.
I advise generally students to watch Doordarshan News because that is the only place where you get news. Rest all is views. They
Yeah,
all
yeah,
want views. That's it. So they will give you
yeah.
their viewpoint and they'll try to impose it. The best thing is
Yeah, yeah.
whatever
I
you're
would take
info.
it one step further and say, don't watch anything. Please read. Please read. Read editorials. Read either the Mint. Read the Indian Express. Read a good newspaper. That's really will add value to your education, your thinking skills. Will prepare you for law school. And the other is read one foreign newspaper. So read the Guardian. Guardian is something I personally like to read. Um, and for those who actually make it to some of the top law schools, this is what their secret is, right? They read the newspapers. I know this firsthand, right? I have very close friends in good law schools, and this is what they'll tell you. What helped them make it is that they read current affairs for years. This is not something you can do just before CLAT. This is something that's a habit. You do it, for you grew up with doing this, right? You read but at least when you're preparing for law school, say you have 1 year, so make sure you read one national newspaper, a good one, and one international.
There's just one question which a student has, which I can also answer, and I'll ask you also to give your perspective. The student is asking, it's anonymous attendee, so I don't know the name. Will the students who come from commerce stream find it difficult to cope with
Mm.
sociology curriculum in the first year? I was a commerce student and I did not have a problem, believe me. The only problems that I faced was initially some terms which my friends who were from humanities could relate to better because I always say this in my sessions that my professor kept on talking about state. When he said state, he meant the government, and I kept on thinking state of Maharashtra or state of Madhya Pradesh. That's the state which I thought. But then it was hardly for 1 or 2 week, I guess, and after which we gripped it up. And the sessions were so interesting. They were all about stories. They were all related to human behavior, how certain concepts are there. So we were all engrossed in it.
Yeah,
And also were introduced to certain things which we were not akin to because in commerce, it's all about how a company runs, how the accounts are there, how the economics are there. So economics is also a part of
yeah,
BALLB. So
yeah,
that is running with you. But sociology gives you a different perspective. And I didn't find any problem because law schools are called as schools for a reason. Everything starts from the scratch. That's my belief. And that's exactly how law schools also behave. They treat you as a kid who doesn't understand things. So they will
Yeah.
help you, they will handhold you, and professors like Shireen do it all the while. That they understand that it's you guys are toddlers, and
Yeah.
you'll fall, and slowly you'll learn to run. So they are also
Yeah.
very patient. That's exactly how it is. Shireen, you
Yeah.
want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. We try our best. We've really handheld our students here. But you're right also. They have students have found it difficult, especially those who have not done come from commerce. But even those who have done it, I'll tell you, sociology, even psychology, any history, political science, it's taught so badly. So so it's very different in the way we teach it here. We are really kind of going into the heart of the concept, and we are using all kinds of aids. So I show a lot of videos, we show a lot of clips from YouTube. Like I said, we do a lot of exercises like this blindfold activity. We had a card game, and in a card game in which you had to it was about what is public and what is private. So we had a card game in which you had to pick up one like air, right, and you had to actually debate it. So we did all these fun things. And so there are ways in which there's a lot of peer learning happening, there's a lot of group learning happening. So there's a ways in which we try to handle it and try to make it, kind of make the learning both textbook but also activity based and kinesthetic and applied, and also something which is, if you're a visual learner, then we try to do that as well. So there are aids, so don't worry. The most important thing is you should be interested, you should like it, you should be able to learn what you have learned and be excited to you will want to take a challenge. It's tough, but I'm going to do it, and I can ask questions, I can get help. And as long as you have that, you're good. If you're going to be afraid and fearful, and, oh my God, there's a new word called modernity, I didn't understand it, and what is it? If you're going to be fretting over it, then it becomes too difficult, right? So if you just come with an open mind and say, well, I'm here and I'm ready to learn, then it's fun for all of us.
So I have a question from Ujjani. Ujjani, we're not answering this right now, and we'll have a proper session for it. Okay, she's asking us about a strong base in political science. So we will have a separate
What is she
seminar.
asking?
She's asking, is a strong base of political science helpful for a person who wants to pursue law?
I asked that question. I mean, I would say that for a lawyer, anyone who does law, you want to, see multiple sides of something. So any argument, you want to see it both, the pros and the cons. That becomes very important to see everything in a multiple perspective. Not to, if you're going to reinforce what you already believe, then I think you would make a pathetic lawyer. And one of the things that sociology does is it's a science, right? It's we don't come with any beliefs, religious beliefs, political beliefs. It's all about evaluating, understanding, seeing the context, seeing it through empathy, kindness, in its wholeness, right? So I would say the answer to that question would be that you would do academically badly if you're going to if anything is just going to reinforce what you already believe. The idea is to ask the questions. Idea is to ask, why is this the way it is? To bring wonder. I wonder, why is this law the way it is? I wonder why the Supreme Court did this. I wonder, which are the power dominant groups that this law is addressing or trying to rectify, right? So those become important questions. So, and that becomes interesting. If we're all here to, we're just here to uh, to to
Agree and live.
yeah, agree and live, and to confirm our biases, then what's the point? Then why are we reading and educating? And it's about the dialogue, right? And what becomes very interesting is, I have a particular belief, you have a particular belief, you give your reasons, I give my reasons, we have a conversation. Maybe you don't change your belief, maybe I don't change my belief, but that conversation is a productive one, and we've listened to each other, and you have taken two steps from where you were, and I've taken two steps, and we found something common and interesting, right? I've learned from you, you learn from me, and that's what life is. So that's how, at least at Bits Law, we want to approach all of this, right? There are no divisions, there are no your and my beliefs. We don't want to allow any kind of line that says you can't talk about this or you can't talk about that. We want to really open everything up for questioning and debate and conversation.
And yeah, like I said, we'll have a separate session also for this. Don't worry. We'll also get a
Okay.
professor who teaches political science who may.
Important question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have already got a very, very informative answer about the same, but then there might be, because I know there are specific questions which are coming from various quarters, as in we keep answering to such questions also.
Okay.
And there's another question about books to read. She has already answered that question and she's also shown.
I'll share a list. Yeah, I'll share
We'll
this.
share a list to you. So yeah, we are at the end of the session. And thank you so much, Shireen, for taking out time.
Thank
I
you everyone for listening
cannot
to
thank
me.
you enough because I know how busy you were with all the marking, with invigilations and everything else, but yet you took out time for this. So we are very, 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 very thankful
Thank you,
to
Deepu. I know you were unwell too, so
you.
thank you for
But then, as I said, these are those questions which I know are right now hounding the students as well as the parents very much. And I think
right.
this is the way we can answer to it. And I'm 100% sure we have been able to help some parents and students get answer to these questions, which is very important for to us also, right?
Right.
I'm thankful to my team also, which at the back end, even though I was not at the office, was able to pull everything together and make
Yeah,
this
fantastic team.
fun of you. And yeah, and if there is
Thank you,
anyone,
Chinman.
yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Anushka.
If you guys have any more questions, you can write to us also, right? And we'll make sure that get answered through an email also. Okay, because we need more informed students. That's how our selection process is also, where we are meeting students. Because I keep on saying this, I want to remind you all once more, it's a 5-year long journey without any exit option. Do not take up law just because you're fascinated by some character like Harvey Specter or something. You should take up law because you have to do a lot of reading about what those 5 years are going to look like, and only then take that call. It's a life defining 5 year, but then it requires certain things also. Like you should know about the subjects like sociology, political science, and everything else, and the way it is being taught, and only then you should deduce and say, okay, this is what I want out of my life, right? So thank you, and thank you to everyone, and have a good night. Bye.
Hi, thank you.